Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. The best way, I think, to learn about a country's foreign policy is to hear the country's foreign minister telling you about the country's foreign policy, current, in the past, and in the future. In this case, we have Sergei Lavrov, the fantastic foreign minister of the Russian Federation, having a little bit of a press conference with domestic journalists and foreign journalists. He makes some claims regarding not only Syria, Ukraine, but others as well. He claims that France, the country of France, tried to initiate secret talks with Russia behind the back of the Ukrainians, kicking the Ukrainians out of the room, which I think will happen. Then he also warns Israel. And then we have Erdogan, who says that he will bury the Kurds. So I have 4 articles ready for you. Let's start with the first one. From Russia Today. This is from December 26, 2024. France offered secret talks on Ukraine, Lavrov claims. Paris has proposed helping Moscow establish dialogue on the conflict without Kiev participation, the Russian foreign minister has said. France has repeatedly offered to help establish secret talks on the Ukraine conflict without Kiev's direct participation, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said. This is very unlike Sergei Lavrov's diplomatic way of saying things, but I saw Lavrov smacking certain obnoxious so-called journalists when they were rude and they were attacking, I would say, in a very imbecilic way, the Russian foreign minister. But nevertheless, let's see what he claims. Speaking to journalists at an end-of-year press conference on Thursday, Lavrov stated that French diplomats have approached the Russian side, and I'm quoting, through closed channels that I've been telling you about. These guys are communicating, hey, you're gonna hit this, I'm gonna hit that, so it's a controlled war, offering to let them, quote-unquote, establish a dialogue on the Ukraine issue. According to the foreign minister, this was done without the involvement of the Ukrainian side. The minister noted that these signals from Paris seem to violate the Western rule of, and I'm quoting, not a word about Ukraine without Ukraine. So, it says, such ambiguous behavior does not inspire a desire to take seriously what is happening at the initiative of our French colleagues. All right, so let's go to the next article from the same press conference. Lavrov warns Israel against sowing a storm in Syria. It's okay. Israel, the Jewish state, has the American bully boy already, how do you call it, unchained to, complete their beatings or whatever. Cross-border strikes on military targets could boomerang back to West Jerusalem, the Russian foreign minister has said. Israel should refrain from solving its geopolitical problems at the expense of war-torn Syria. They will do whatever they want. It says reckless actions by the Jewish state could erode the security framework in the Middle East, he warned. That's exactly what they want, I think. And here it is. One cannot expect to destroy all military facilities in a neighboring country and then live in peace and harmony forever. This is like sowing a storm that will inevitably come back to haunt those who engage in such actions. I think he's 100% accurate. After Assad's removal and subsequently asylum in Russia, Israel has launched multiple airstrikes across the border in an internationally recognized independent and sovereign country of Syria, targeting Syrian air bases, weapons depots, and other military facilities to prevent arms from reaching, and I'm quoting, the wrong hands. They should then bomb Ukraine as well. West Jerusalem claimed to have destroyed 70 to 80% of its neighbor's strategic military capabilities, with the Syrian Navy essentially being eliminated as an operational force. According to Lavrov, another facet of Syria's well-being hinges on the situation on the oil-rich eastern part of the country. The US, the minister charged, has, and I'm quoting, illegally occupied a significant part of the territory, including areas with major oil fields and fertile lands. So, who is the occupier in Syria? It's not the Russians, but they tell us here, the media operatives all the time bark as loud as they can that the Russians are illegally in Ukraine. Yeah, okay, How about the Americans in Syria? I'm listening intently. All right, or intensively, whatever. Let's move to the next one. And this gives an overview, a summary of Lavrov's statements. Lavrov's on Ukraine, Trump, and Syria. Key statements from his annual press conference. All right, so let's see what is got. On the Ukraine conflict, a ceasefire is deemed a path to nowhere. Correct. Russia is not interested in empty discussions about a resolution. They have to fulfill their 4 reasons. Future agreements on Ukraine must include mechanisms to prevent violations. Those mechanisms will not be on paper only. Remember what happened with Minsk agreements 1 and 2? They were on paper, did not mean anything. Therefore, there have to be some Chinese troops over there, some other people involved, so you don't have only one guy and another guy. They will eventually get at it pretty soon. This is going to be a regrouping session. Russia is open to consultations with the Trump administration and hopes for an underlying understanding on the conflict's root causes. NATO expansion. That's the root cause, however you want to take it. And financial economic interest in Russia, China on global scale. By the interests that are not being the profiteers of this war. No, they're just helping the bad Ukrainians, poor Ukrainians that are attacked by the evil Russians. That's how the narrative flies here. And we know what the truth is, don't we? Moscow has received multiple private proposals from France to discuss Ukraine without Kiev involvement. Targets within Ukraine will be selected based on threats to Russia, including decision-making center in Kiev. On U.S. relations, the U.S. will continue its efforts to contain Russia, regardless of who is in power in Washington. That means not the presidents, the interests behind everything are in charge. You don't think so? Okay. Signals from the Trump team indicate an interest in resuming dialogue, but the first step must come from the Americans. So I'm glad the Russians are determined to continue as far as they can and they don't bullshit anymore. Called them partners. On French initiative regarding Ukraine. France has approached Russia through close channels, I already spoke about that, but Paris' ambiguous behavior, given its continuing military support for Kiev, raises doubts about its initiatives. On European Union relations, Russia is willing to engage with Western representatives seeking mutually beneficial agreements as exemplified by Hungary and Slovakia. EU members are beginning to express interest in establishing trust-based conversation. No, it's based on power. You know how you have trust-based conversation like this? Okay, all right, or like this. Or like this. All right, let's talk. All right, yeah, And the other guys will come to the table and will be honest. Otherwise, if they think they have the power, they would come like this. So it's about who has the biggest gun at the, how do you call it, debate table or negotiating table. It's not, oh my God, we're going to understand one another. No, you lied. You lied. Who's you? Remember that promise not to move eastward, the NATO defensive alliance? Promise to the Soviets/Russians? No 1 inch, James Baker said. And what did they do? 5 expansions? Right? Now they lied big time. That was in exchange for the Russians removing their... no, Russians, my bad. You should punch me for saying the Russians. The Soviets removing their troops from Germany and allowing Germany to unify. They could have stayed there. They could have stayed there forever. I mean, forever. It was an understanding. But the gentlemen in the West had a gentleman understanding with the Soviets and they took a shit on it. Then you remember Ukraine was supposed to be neutral by the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. Who broke that? Who violated that? Not the Russians. The guys who in 2008 in Bucharest NATO summit, which is George W. Bush, said one day Ukraine and Georgia, Ukraine neutral, and Georgia will join NATO. There's no more neutrality, isn't it? And then in 2014 overthrowing a legitimate, democratically elected government in Kiev, in Ukraine. By whom? By agencies from outside with the help of traitors inside. And since then, shit was set loose. All right, so if you want to go to this, and then the Minsk agreements 1 and 2 were ignored by the same guys, with the French and the Germans being the guarantors of the Minsk agreements. They didn't care. And then he started the war. Who wanted to negotiate in 2021 in October, November, December, and January 2022 about guarantees for Russia? Russia. NATO said, no, fuck off. So don't give me shit. All right, here it is. All right, and now they want trust-based conversation after you impose sanctions on yourself and on Russia. Or defending whose interest exactly? On Syria. Russia maintains contact with the new Syrian authorities and anticipate renewed economic cooperation. Moscow is preparing to assist in organizing elections in Syria with international recognition. Congress regarding Turkey border security with Syria concerns regarding Turkey's border security with Syria is acknowledged, while Israel should not compromise Syrian security for its own. Russia opposes any fragmentation of Syria, highlighting the desire of some parties for this outcome. That's why this is fantastic. And the last topic, Erdogan threatens to bury Kurds. The Turkish president has called for the disarmament of militants in Syria, accusing them of threatening his national security. So that means the Russians invading Ukraine for their own national security because NATO brought military and so on installations in Ukraine and trained the Ukrainians should be taken seriously. If Turkey's national security is taken seriously, then the other ones should be the same way. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has vowed to, quote-unquote, bury Kurdish militants in Syria if they refuse to lay down their arms, ultimatum, in a stark warning to the People's Protection Units operating on the border between the two states. Speaking on Wednesday to lawmakers in Ankara, Erdogan promised to, quote-unquote, eradicate the terrorist organization that is trying to wave a wall of blood between us and the Kurdish siblings. The separatist murderers will either bid farewell to their weapons or they will be buried in Syria lands along with their weapons. Well, what are you going to do with the Americans? What are they going to do when they protect them? Erdogan has repeatedly stated that the YPG poses a significant threat to the Turkish security and vowed to prevent the establishment of a terror corridor near the country's southern borders. He has criticized the United States for providing weapons and training to the YPJ, a group Ankara views as an extension of the Kurdistan Workers' Party's PKK. Turkey regards both as terrorist organizations. So if the Americans designate certain groups as terrorist organizations and terrorists and they hit them wherever they want on this planet, all right, then everybody else can do the same thing. No? No. All right, here it is. Lavrov again, Erdogan, Israel. Israel will do whatever it wants. Who's going to do anything to Israel? Nobody. Just the poor Palestinians and some brave guys in the area. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.